They say kings have everything, but what happens when a king wants more than everything? This is the story of a ruler who lost his crown, his kingdom, and his dignity, all because of one thing: greed. But in losing it all, he found what truly mattered. Once, in the heart of a golden desert, there lived a king named Zahir. He ruled over the kingdom of Arusha, a land blessed with wealth, beauty, and peace. His palace was carved from white marble, his throne plated with gold, and his treasury filled beyond count. The people admired him for his strength, but deep within his eyes was a shadow of never enough. Zahir had conquered neighboring lands and filled his treasury with their riches. He held feasts that lasted for days and wore robes embroidered with gems. And yet he would often look at his vast treasure room and sigh. "Is this all?" he would whisper. One day, his chief advisor, a wise old man named Salim, said, "Your Majesty, your people prosper, your kingdom is admired, and your name echoes through deserts and mountains. What more do you seek?" Zahir looked out at the horizon. "I want it all," he said. "More gold, more land, more power. I want to be remembered not just as a king, but as a god." Salim lowered his gaze. "Greatness built on greed collapses on itself, my king. Be careful. The line between ruler and ruin is thin." Zahir laughed. "You speak like a monk, not a minister." But soon he began preparing to conquer the final free kingdom that bordered his, a peaceful and modest land called Darvash, ruled by King Hatem, a kind and just man who never sought war. Salim warned him, "This king does not seek riches, but wisdom. He will not fight for gold, but for his people's peace. If you go to war, you risk not only your army, but your soul." Zahir ignored the advice. He raised his banners and marched with arrogance in his heart. "Let the world know," he declared, "that nothing escapes the shadow of Zahir." But sometimes, a shadow becomes so large, it consumes even the one who cast it. Zahir's army advanced into Darvash with the roar of thunder, but something unexpected happened. The people of Darvash did not fight with weapons. They resisted with strategy, unity, and silence. King Hatem had prepared for this. Rather than meet Zahir in open battle, he let his land starve the enemy. Zahir's soldiers ran out of food and water. The desert heat burned their spirits. Villages closed their doors. Trade routes vanished. And then came betrayal. Several of Zahir's own generals, tired of blind ambition, turned against him. In just 3 weeks, Zahir, the man who had once ruled a kingdom of gold, found himself hiding in a cave, wounded and alone, his army scattered, his name cursed. He tore the golden ring from his finger and threw it into the sand. "Why?" he shouted at the sky. "Why has everything left me?" A voice echoed from the cave entrance. "You left everything first." It was Abd al-Rashid, a wandering dervish Zahir had once driven out of his palace for speaking truth. The same man who had once told him, "Greed blinds the eye, deafens the ear, and hardens the heart. Be careful what you chase." Zahir lowered his head. "I am no longer a king," he whispered. "I am nothing." The dervish sat beside him. "Then perhaps now you can become something real." But Zahir had nothing, no food, no army, no home. For days he wandered the outskirts of villages. When he knocked on doors, people slammed them shut. They had heard of the king who taxed the poor and burned villages for gold. They had no pity. One morning, a child tossed him a piece of dry bread. "Here," she said, "for your hunger." Tears filled Zahir's eyes, not because of the bread, but because it had come from someone with nothing, and it was more than he had ever given when he had everything. Zahir, once proud and polished, now walked barefoot through muddy roads. He lived under trees, slept beside wells, and ate from charity. But something began to change within him. He began listening. He listened to farmers talking about the rains. He listened to mothers praying for their children. He listened to shepherds who sang to the stars. And in their words, he found something he never had in his palace: peace. One day, in a small village far from his fallen kingdom, he saw an old man struggling to lift a sack of grain. Zahir, without thinking, rushed to help. The man thanked him. "Not many offer help without asking something in return," he said. Zahir smiled gently. "Maybe that's why we lose the things that matter." Over time, people in the village began trusting him. They called him Rafiq, the helpful one. They never knew he had once been a king, and he never told them. Years passed. Zahir built a small school in that village, using his knowledge to teach children about history, leadership, and the value of honesty. He became known across nearby lands not as a king, but as a wise man whose eyes held stories of both glory and regret. One evening, as he sat beneath a tree with Salim, who had also survived and found him again, he whispered, "I had to become a beggar to learn the worth of giving. I had to be forgotten to learn the value of being real." Salim replied, "You were once a king in the eyes of men. Now you are a king in the hearts of those who matter." Zahir closed his eyes. He was no longer hungry for gold, no longer thirsty for power. He had found something far richer, a life with meaning. This story tells that greed may fill your hands, but it empties your soul. True richness lies not in what you keep, but in what you give, not in the power you hold, but in the hearts you touch.